What's up, guys? Messenger of the Cross, Pulse Point Media. So I was just thinking today about how, our military goes into other countries and they set up shop and they put boots on the ground and they take over an area. And when they take over an area, after they're done, destroying the area and, collapsing and controlling an area, the military will set up a proxy army or a third-party police force, proxy group, a stay-behind army or a stay-behind police force so that the, military personnel can move on to the next thing. And so the Marines are, trained to set up these proxy armies in other countries, and other branches of the government also are participating. Other intelligence services do that. You know what I'm saying? But so it's really important to understand that there is a stay behind army in the United States and that the United States has been collapsed. And all the laws show it, and everything else, the congressional records, everything shows that the United States is bankrupt and insolvent, and we went into corporate receivership and our country was restructured. And because it was restructured, we are now living in a police state under emergency rule, under crisis management. That is what they call it. And because of the emergency, they are operating domestically as a stay behind army, the Marines, the military. It's all done with dudes in regular clothes to blend in, you know. But, obviously they show us their gang colors all the time. The red and the white color sensitizing because this is an intermediate force tactic used. Intermediate means, somewhere between, armed conflict and presence. Do you understand what I'm saying? Making their presence known to you, you know. So it's all these tactics used right below the level of armed conflict. So they're engaging you and they are saying that they're engaging you and are policing the United States, dudes in regular clothes, a civilian national security force just as strong, just as well funded, working together with the threat fusion centers and the Marines and all these other groups that are there to run and prosecute this war of attrition as everything collapses, as everything breaks down. So it's all about the intermediate force capability and tactics that are used below the level of armed conflict. And so we heard, Colonel Wendell Limbach, from the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, talking about, being able to compete in a environment. And he uses the word compete below the level of armed conflict, really using EMF weapons and always, having a presence, boots on the ground, and just this continual presence to intimidate. And they only reveal their presence, to people that see the truth and are awake and that are being targeted. So it's this less than lethal force below the level of armed conflict. And he says that a lot. And that really means that they are committed to engaging you in a way that can be denied. Do you understand? And he's talking about engaging the general public, innocent citizens to deal with so-called threats using less than lethal force below the level of armed conflict and really engaging in a way which allows them to maintain their existence without, a total war happening. You know what I mean? So they torture, they hide the abuse, they color sensitize, they gaslight, they damage property, they break into your home, they blacklist you, they cut you off from society. And so this is how, they exist with dudes in regular clothes on the streets in America, really our own military policing United States citizens due to the crisis and the emergency. That is their excuse to violate rights and profile police and predictive police and mete out punishment with no due process. And they want to exist without being detected. So they call for tools other than lethality. And, when this Colonel Wendell, he's talking about how, and he repeats over and over how these weapon systems, can't kill you and can't hurt you and are just very novel, he says. So, very new technologies that can be applied, like when you go into a city and you can microwave somebody in their house or on their way to their car or at the park or when they go to the grocery store. So the war is being brought to the soccer moms and the families in the United States that are innocent civilians and just based on really political policing. Really. Profile policing means that you don't get to answer for and have a fair trial over accusations. And the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office is that stand behind army that is left in the United States because the United States has collapsed and has been destroyed. And we're just all sitting in this as collateral against the debt. We have been pledged. We have been offered up. We are the sacrifice that is pledged as collateral against the debt. So, Colonel Wendell's always, selling these technologies and talking about, where they can have a need to use these technologies and always looking for new ways to apply them. But it's just a selling point that he says that these weapon systems can't kill you, you know, and they're very proud about not being able to, not killing you and using these weapon systems, even though they can torture you for years and burn your skin and fry your organs and electrocute you in your own home, in your own body. You know what I mean? EMF radiation, the EMF spectrum, and the level of radiation that they are broadcasting on targeted individuals and people that they have selected and singled out is giving people cancer. So yeah, you don't kill them right away. You kill them with 1,000 cuts over 25 years. You know what I mean? But you definitely shorten somebody's life and destroy the quality of that person's life and remove all ability for that person to support themselves and care about others and care about themselves and be present in their own standing in their own life. The Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office is the Army, the ones that are bringing the force. And that force is less than lethal, and they are training, and it is called Intermediate Force Capabilities, and they are using directed energy weapons on the general public. And they just label you. They just say you're a threat and you're a danger to the community. And they profile police you, and then they begin to use the military begins to use these weapon systems on you. And it's not just the military. This is a whole system. And you can find that out when you look at the threat fusion centers. So what is the JIFCO? What is the JIFCO? The Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office. It's really just the U.S. Department of Defense organization responsible for developing, coordinating, and integrating non-lethal and intermediate force technologies across the military. This is directly referenced in many places on the internet, and all the offices are listed that participate. So the core function of the JIFCO is really, and we've heard Colonel Wendell go on and on about, how great everything is. But you never call in the Marines and the military if there's not a problem and if you're not, involved in a war. And it could even be a genocide happening in the United States, like the Bolshevik Revolution, where the military is operating domestically in regular clothes and radicalizing society to engage because they have all these toys and they have all these weapon systems and they got to find reasons to use them. That's their career. So their mission is to support the national defense strategy by giving U.S. forces tools that operate between shouting and shooting. Do you understand? Between shouting and shooting, meaning, capabilities that influence and deter and disable without resorting to lethal force, but, giving you cancer, radiating your organs, you know, uh, shutting down your kidneys, shutting down your heart. You know what I mean? Torturing you with microwave pulse energy. You know what I mean? So they can disable you and collapse and control everything around you as a targeted individual and then begin to torture you in your own home with these intermediate force capabilities. And they are supporting the national defense strategy. And, they just label you and call you a terrorist with no evidence, no proof, no violation of the law. You are guilty because we say you're guilty, and then the targeting begins. So, in plain terms, they build and coordinate tools that let the military control situations, shape behavior, and manage threats without killing people. And they just label you as a threat. You support the Constitution, you believe in freedom, you follow Christ. Uh, you know, you might believe uh in freedom too much and individual choice and being able to live your own life. You might believe in that too much. So it's all about shaping behavior and using technologies to fully control free association. You're not allowed to talk to your family members. You're not allowed to be close to anybody. And they completely hijack and completely control the people around the target to be used as a weapons system, basically. I call it like these meat suits, this flesh around me has been hijacked and has literally been weaponized. And I call the people that are perps human prison bars because that is what they are. They're a node of slavery in this system. And they have been co-opted and completely hijacked and controlled and given themselves over to these technologies and have come under the influence and are being weaponized. So people themselves are being weaponized. Even your closest loved ones being against you should prove that. The ones that are supposed to love you the most are being used the most to break your heart, to damage you, to damage your life and your movement forward. And you're just wondering why family and friends are competing with you over the resources and over the things that are supposed to be yours, the things that you've created and the things that you have built in life. And yet there's all these people that say, no, 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 you can't have that. You can't be that. You can't do that. And we're taking it away. There is a war happening in the United States, and family and friends have been co-opted in it. And they are cowards. They are cowards because they go along with abusing others and go along with abusing innocents. So, the director explicitly, discusses how intermediate force capabilities support the national defense strategy across the competition continuum, which is just him, trying to find a reason to exist where there's not armed conflict, where there's no need for the military, there's no need for these people on the streets, but yet they want to be there and ready in case. And they are policing innocent citizens through these tactics of abuse and control. And it's not just them. It's not just them. Many other third-party groups are a part of this. So they build and coordinate tools, this Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office. They're the ones that build and coordinate tools and let the military control situations, shape behavior, and manage threats without killing people. But, they always want to add not killing people when, like, basically that's just complete garbage because the radiation levels kill people. And when you keep somebody under such high powered microwave energy weapons all the time and you're doing it for years to that person, they're going to get cancer. The radiation levels are off the charts, and all somebody has to do is take a radiation meter to their head and watch the red line, meter just red line, like I have many times. You know what I mean? So the GIFCO is involved, and this is a branch of the Marines developing, and other offices in the government developing non-lethal weapons. And it's acoustic hailing devices, flashbangs and dazzlers. That's what people think that, they're, using for technology when it comes to non-lethal weapons, but it's so far from the truth. Vehicle stopping tools, area denial systems. So they operate with these frequency-based weapons platforms as a less than lethal force, as a stand behind army, and as a uh, a matter of fact, they inspire the low level conflict. Okay. It's always the government at these protests that we've seen over the years in black clothes and ski masks amongst normal people that are there just to exercise their rights and trying to shut that assembly down through violence and wrapping yourself in, the American flag and then committing crimes. Like that's what they do. These informants and people that, try to stir the pot. It's like they send these people in to try to kick the beehive so they can crack down and use the weapon systems. Okay. And it's always the same. You always find out later that it was the local police, and that the people that were doing the destruction and tipping the garbage cans over and throwing bricks at windows were the police. You know what I mean? And that's what we find out later. The threat fusion centers are there to not save you and keep you safe, but to promote a war because that's the industry, that's the business that they're involved in. So they want conflict. They want to radicalize. They want to use less than lethal weapons on you and your family. And you're just going to have to understand that and accept that. So they also coordinate research with all these EMF weapon systems and platforms and wireless communication systems that are way advanced, synthetic telepathy and everything else across the Marine Corps, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and there's so many joint programs. Do you understand? And their job is just to ensure all branches have access to the same intermediate force tools, which are your microwave pulse energy weapons and the other tools that they use to, torture innocent American citizens. And pain compliance is part of that. Pain compliance, torturing you to get you to submit, to get you to surrender and give up your right to choose. And it's all done by pain, by torture. And they try to modify behavior, is what they do. And that is what the Marines are involved in. They are operating domestically in the United States, and same with the CIA and all the other branches of the government. And they are prosecuting a war on terror. And this gives them an open-ended reason to be able to do whatever they want because, the shadowy enemy that can never be caught, that we don't know who they are or where they are. It could be anybody. And so it allows them the ability to prosecute a war on innocent citizens just by labeling and by threat assessments that are corrupt and wrong. And, as we've seen, even children being put on the terror watch list, even children and soccer moms. I always say soccer moms because it's literally like they reinvent the wheel when it comes to terms and words and language and begin to start saying the soccer mom is the terrorist because they've changed the definition over and over and over and over to selectively enforce the law against whoever they want. And the law is corrupt. The law, is designed to hold you, guilty before due process and to mete out punishment and suffering to you because they've already labeled you and they aren't wrong ever. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So integrating directed energy, non-lethal systems is what these dudes do. Okay. And it's millimeter wave systems like the active denial system or high powered microwave systems for disabling electronics, like they do to me all the time. I mean, I can't tell you like how many times my electric toothbrush and my electric face scrubber or like, my electric skateboard, it will all go down at the same time and all stop working at the same time. What are the chances? But when you take out the radiation meter, it's off the charts in my home. You know what I mean? And it's not just the Wi-Fi or the router or things like that or the network. We are being microwaved and fried, and we are being boiled and cooked alive. Slow kill over a long period of time to have the plausible deniability and get away with it. It is a warfare tactic. So these systems are part of really a broader non-lethal portfolio, and JIFCO, the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, oversees this war of attrition and this war that brings less than lethal force, but still uses tactics that are below the level of armed conflict, but still engaging citizens that are innocent and still doing whatever they want to us. You see, all to keep us safe and save lives. So they just come in a neighborhood, set up shop, and take everybody and put them under the EMF broadcast and then begin to control everyone like an army against whoever they want to hurt and injure and damage and silence. Okay. So, but they're involved in training and policy guidance, rules of engagement, which they don't follow, and then ethical use guidelines or operational doctrine or testing and uh, evaluation standards. So yeah, they're doing experiments on innocent American citizens. That never stopped after MK Ultra and after the Tuskegee experiment and after the radiation experiments. And you even have a president apologizing to you as American citizens, and you still just don't get what's going on and how they don't care about you at all as a citizen and how they're not here to keep you safe and save lives, but that they're invested in this business model that sacrifices all of us. Do you understand? So, and you are the commodity, you are the node. Your body, your brain waves, your nervous system is the target in this warfare. And they have the ability and tools to be able to come into an area, set up shop without you even being aware of it, and come and go with you at the same time, no matter what time of the day you come and go, and begin to start damaging your property, putting notes on your car, following you around and trying to intimidate and creating hostile conflict around the target, around the innocent victim of these military forces that do this to innocent American citizens. And then they want you to celebrate the false patriotism. They want you to see the commercials of a military guy coming home off a plane and seeing his daughter in the airport and, getting on their knees, and they're both on their knees just crying and hugging, and he lifts her up in the air and spins in the circle. How many times are we going to see that? You know what I mean? They know how to manipulate your emotions. They know how to speak to your instincts. They know how to get what they want done. You understand? And that's just to conceal and cover up and to misdirect, what's really going on. And it's a way that, propaganda that is used to relate to you and to conceal this war of attrition and this hidden warfare that's taking place in the United States. So they support operations in urban and low intensity conflict areas, and, the intermediate force tools are especially relevant with crowded and urban environments, peacekeeping missions, right? It's all about peace and torturing you to get that peace. And you're supposed to give up all control to your own life because we're here to keep you safe and save lives. And that means you don't get to make any decisions on your own. You are under the total control and of the military and of these task forces that have destroyed many of our lives, right? In this war of attrition and this war to break your will. You know what I mean? Less than lethal weapons, under the level of armed conflict, engaging citizens. This is what the leader, Wendell Limbach, the colonel of the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, is busy doing. He's busy going around selling the technology and pretending like they're here to keep you safe and save lives, and that they're not abusing this technology and hurting millions of us, when we've got video after video of testimony of people coming forward. My skin is burnt, my eyes are burnt, I have blisters all over me, like they're burning my hands and burning my feet and burning the sensitive areas of my body all day, all night. They're torturing me so that I can't sleep. They're damaging my car and my property. They're blacklisting me from employment in a job. They're cutting me off from all social life. And the only thing I experience is hostility and hatred and bitterness and people trying to take swipes at me. That is that is what they want to produce in your life. And it's all about peacekeeping missions in the United States, humanitarian operations. It's all done taking the moral high ground before they do the abuse so that they can keep abusing you. So it's well thought out because they've already positioned themselves to take the moral high ground by the way they've designed the tactics of abuse and control, that when you start complaining about it, you look crazy and mentally ill. And that is why they do it. Okay, so the Jeffco is, you know, uh, involved in these things, and they are, always talking about, you know, uh, the value of non-lethal options, right? But the military and the Marines are trained to kill. That's what they're trained to do, and most of them shy away from, when they hear like a program like, hey, you want to join the less than lethal weapons program? Most Marines are like, no way, man. I'm going out to, throw down. I'm going out because that's why I joined the Marines, to have the permission for lethality. Most Marines are like that, and that's probably good that they are, because they're the front lines, and the front force. But the Marines have been hijacked, and the Marines are being controlled and used in the United States to operate domestically, um, with intermediate force capabilities and tools, and below the level of armed conflict. And they are provoking, they are destroying, they are harming, they are hurting, and trying to get an engagement happening. That is what they're doing to all of us, really. So they say that, oh, these non-lethal weapons, they're just to reduce civilian casualties. Well, I didn't know a war was happening in the United States, but this guy, Colonel Wendell Limbach, he's ready to talk openly about how their less than lethal force, below the level of armed conflict, really means just engaging you in regular clothes and in plain clothes, appearing as just a common civilian. You know what I mean? And they don't want to be detected. They don't want to be exposed that they are organized and coordinated in many ways. And this is just one example, guys. I'm not saying that this is the only group that does this, but these are the main pushers of these weapon systems to deploy to stay behind forces and armies that are left in countries that have collapsed. And literally, like, that's why we have a police state and the Patriot Act and the evisceration of the Bill of Rights and the violation of posse comitatus and the militarization of the police. And I could go on and on about the police state and the national security state that we are now living in, and that we have been for like 80 years. The Constitution was suspended when there was the restructuring of what this nation used to be or was supposed to be, and all the laws were restructured. That's why they come forward years later and show you that it's already been done. The Patriot Act and all these things, NDAA, which criminalizes American citizens and gives the permission to torture and kill American citizens and label them as terrorists. Okay. And they've been training for years at FEMA. They call it, the domestic extremism. And, they talk a lot about that in their training manuals. Uh, and you can, go online and even watch, if you type in like FEMA trains local sheriff's office, that George Washington is a terrorist. And you can watch one of these speakers and teachers from FEMA that teaches the local sheriff's office that freedom is terror and that war is peace. And, they come in and they train your local sheriff's office that, that things are getting more dangerous and that they need to use more lethality and more force. And they're pushing for more lethality to be used. And in this fake war of attrition that they're engineering enemies with, and creating the opposition and playing both sides of the fence to dragnet everybody to pretend like there's, this that things are way worse than they are, and it's just really bad though that they're operating domestically. So like in one sentence, I would say the JIVCO is the Pentagon's hub for developing and integrating non-lethal and intermediate force technologies, which are used by the perps. Okay. Tools designed to influence, deter, and disable you without killing you. Just disable you. Shut down your kidneys for a while, shut down your heart, and give you a heart attack, shut down and torture and torment your nervous system till you can barely sit still, psychically drive you through one crisis after the next, and drive you psychically. That is what they do. Tools designed to influence, deter, and disable without killing, but I would say with killing because they've killed many, many targets. And so to say that these weapon systems can't kill you is a complete, total lie and fabrication. But what's new? So they support the national defense strategy by giving US forces more options than just lethal force. Okay. So this just means that they are engaging you. And whether you know it or not, or think so or not, or like it or not, or believe it or not, that is what we're seeing. We are seeing, this stay behind army of trained, organized revolutionaries that are military personnel that are there to police the United States because of the collapse and bankruptcy and crisis. And they are turning it into a dictatorship by executive order, right? Because Congress doesn't read the bills that they pass. It's just executive order after executive order in the name of an emergency. Okay, so we're here to keep you safe and save lives. There's an emergency. The United States is bankrupt. So we're going to have emergency rule. And that is why they rule by executive order, because we're in a dictatorship. That is why they rule by executive order. It doesn't matter what your flavor is. It doesn't matter if it's fascism, communism, socialism, capitalism. None of those things really matter because we've never had real capitalism. We've never had a real free market. It's been dominated and controlled by the insider trading. You understand that these guys just give money to each other and give money to their buddies because they print the money. You understand? So they're on a whole other level than us. We had to work for a living to survive, and these guys just print money and give it to their buddies. And so, and that is the bottom line. And that's why they're so detached and disconnected. But you can see this intermediate force capabilities and really what they are. And I would say that by definition, the IFC or the intermediate force capabilities are military tools designed to operate between verbal warnings and lethal force. Okay, so that is the targeting, that is the gang stalking, that is the destruction to your property, that's the gaslighting. That is the color sensitizing and abusing you in plain sight so that you complain about it. Guys are following me around in red cars and red shirts and red hats and red shoes, and they're being abusive to me. You know what I mean? They want you to say that so that they can quickly chime in and say, you're mentally ill, you're crazy. We need to get you help. That's the way they do this abuse. So they really give US forces options to influence, options to deter, stop, or control, guys. And that is people, vehicles, or situations without killing, but just marring you to death, over time. Just killing you slowly by each cut. In over 25 years, pretty soon your body gives out. That's so, this is really the GIFCO's uh, purpose and mission, and the ones pushing these silent weapon systems to be used. They look for the need and create the need when they can't find a reason to use these things. Okay, like the EMF broadcast, the neural remote monitoring, the synthetic telepathy, the microwave auditory hearing effect, the fray effect, speaking to your brain, basically, you know, having conversations going on in your head all day long that are synthetic, that are not coming from you. And you recognize it, you see it, and it's psychic driving. It's a form of abuse, it's a form of manipulation and control. And it's designed to drive you out of yourself so that you do something or say something stupid. That is what they want. And then they can say, you're a terrorist, you're an extremist. Look at how extreme this person's reactions are, and there is no cause or no reason. They don't talk about the torture and the abuse and the damage and the engagement that they hide from, the general public, and they hide from most people, but most people are too scared to admit that they're participating in this. So the IFC is used, the intermediate force capabilities are built to, deny access to areas without lethal harm, stop vehicles without destroying them, control crowds in urban or, unstable environments, communicate or warn at long distances, acoustic hailing devices are used, disabling electronics without explosives, sharp, really shape behavior in low intensity conflict or peacekeeping missions through broadcasting an EMF broadcast that makes you docile and tired and weak and sick and throwing up all the time, where you're always weak and too weak to even do anything because that's from the radiation levels that they're bombarding you with. So they're especially important in urban warfare, these weapon systems that are silent, humanitarian operations, so-called border security, maritime security, situations involving civilians mixed with combatants. And that is the doctrine that all the nations of the world have gotten on board with. It's not nations fighting nations anymore. They are a new world order joined together in lockstep, and they are one. They are one already, the nations of the world. They want you to believe we're fighting China. They want you to believe we're fighting all these countries. But what has really gone on is this fourth generational war has been declared on citizens worldwide. And they justify it through sustainability and through all these other things that they need to depopulate. They need to get rid of the mass number of people so that they can have a manageable number to control and merge everybody with technology. And that is their desire, getting us down to a manageable number. That's why the military is being deployed in the United States. And it's all national security and it can't be investigated. So the tools that they use with non-lethal weapons, usually people think they're, rubber bullets or rubber rounds, flashbangs, pepper based systems, and blunt impact munitions, but it's so much deeper than that. The systems that they use mainly to control behavior are these non-lethal, supposedly non-lethal directed energy weapons like high power microwaves, you know, and using, green lasers, dazzlers, using different optical distractions and detours, and the millimeter wave systems, the acoustic systems that they use, long range acoustic devices, and hailing and warning systems that they use are just, the surface level of the technologies that are considered less than lethal, and I don't know why they call it less than lethal, because they're very dangerous and can kill you. So they want to just justify and rationalize and get people on board with this evolutionary technology that transforms all of human interaction, right? They can control behavior. And that is what they're doing with our family members. We just are not weak enough to submit and go along and be afraid. We are independent and autonomous, and we have God, and we know what we're being told. Okay. And we know what we're being shown as well. So they use, electromagnetic pulse uh, systems that are destructive for like tire deflation or mobility denial. And that is one of the key elements of having this army of people doing this to us, is that they want to prevent your movement and your free association. That is only really something that the military would have the ability and capability and training to do. And that is what I see really. Many people think that the coordination is spiritual, it's on a whole other level, but I think it's layered through all areas of society. Everybody has seen the sign, see something, say something. We live in a culture of snitch, spy, surveil, rat on your neighbor, which is so pathetic. It's so pathetic. You guys know who Ralph is in that one movie, where he betrayed his family and joined, the Nazis, and was a Nazi officer who basically turned his family into the death camps. You know what I mean? Because he had to show and demonstrate his loyalty to dear leader, to dear leader. You know, like when you watch the videos of dudes in being brought out single file in front of Kim Jong Un in North Korea, and at gunpoint they're made to cry tears for dear leader. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's how good it'll get in the United States. You know what I mean? But the people ruling and running this kind of thing always present it on the moral high ground. They always take that as a way to justify the use and the deployment and use of all these weapon systems. It's always going to be sold by telling us all about the benefits and the good things about it, but they never want to talk about the torture and the harassment and the tactics of policing that are military grade tactics of policing and control and abuse. So the national defense strategy is, really about giving forces that are scalable immediately and responsible options that reduce civilian casualties, quote unquote. But that just gives them their excuse to operate amongst the civilians in regular clothes, you see, and they're always there to prevent escalation, and they're going to decide what is escalation and what's not escalation. And and this kind of policing and having the military and the threat fusion centers and everything else, they supposedly designed this for precision and control and minimizing collateral damage. But the only time you bring in the Marines and have military policing and boots on the ground in a stay behind army is when you get a collapse of society. Okay, like I want you to know how far along we are and how it is horrific. So they hide the targeting of selected targets and torture them to death. And uh, and I believe that it's gotten to the point where these systems are also being sold to local sheriff's offices, the weapon systems, because as long as they keep us in a state of war and a state of emergency, our rights are suspended. And that's just the law. So the intermediate force capabilities are the Pentagon's toolkit for influencing, stopping, and controlling threats without killing. And they just decide, you see, this is what I'm trying to say. They get to make up what the threat is. Okay. So they get to define what that threat is. And it's your soccer mom. It's your Christian, Bible believing, radical extremist. That is what they say. And that is what the MIAC report, MIAC, the MIAC report, which was a federal training manual in 2012, that was distributed to local sheriff's offices all around the United States. And they were getting training, about, freedom is terror, war is peace, that kind of thinking. You have rights, you're suspicious. If anybody says that they have rights, they're suspicious and combative. Like that's what they tell the police. So intermediate force capabilities are the Pentagon's toolkit for influencing, stopping, and controlling so-called threats without killing the person. But that's just a lie, because they're killing many people that are innocent, and it's just part of the collateral damage. They don't care. They're testing their technology on the general public. So they're really about, bridging the gap between verbal commands and the lethal force that they want to be able to carry out and use. And they are looking for reasons to use lethal force, especially in crowded or politically sensitive environments, which, the United States is completely like that. So what does the force mean in joint intermediate force capabilities? I would say that, the title joint really in JIFCO, the word force does not, mean violence or coercion in this sense, but a physical domination, a physical presence. And it refers to, a military force in the technical and doctrinal sense. So, meaning the full range of tools the US military can use to influence, deter, or control a situation. So the director, Colonel Wendell Limbach, I hope I'm saying his name right, but he states that the JIFCO's mission is to support the national defense strategy across competition continuum. And what he means is finding new ways to involve the military in everyday life. That's really what the competition, how do we exist without them detecting and knowing and being conscious of our presence? Okay. And how can we exist and be a deterrence, but also be hidden and be an influence? And these are non-lethal engagements. That is what the collapse control game and the damage to your property and the breaking in your house and the coming and going with you and the blacklisting you and doing all these things to you is all about non-lethal engagement. And they have decided to wage war on innocent citizens in the United States this way. And this is what they've declared. This is what they talk about. This is what all their meetings are about. If you go online and you look to Quantico, Virginia, United States, and you look at the DVID's website, the Defense Visual Information Distribution Service, and we're going to go through this video in a second, and then I'm going to end this video after this video because I just want to keep it simple today. But, what does this intermediate force mean? Well, I think I've broken it down pretty much, but it means, capabilities that operate between verbal warnings and lethal weapons. So they have this full range of tactics of abuse and control in which they are trained to be able to function and operate in regular everyday life and bring the war to you when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the park, when you go to try to meet friends, when you try to have friends, when you try to have a home, when you have a vehicle and you can get around, and then you've got all these people damaging your car again and again and again. You move forward and fix it, they damage it. You move forward and fix it, they damage it again. You move forward and fix it, and you could spend 25 years just fighting and locked up in that survival game. And it's all designed to neutralize you and to contain you. And that is why they are doing it. Okay. So the word force is really a military doctrine. Force doesn't mean violence, but it means any action taken to influence behavior and outcomes. And I'm just here to tell you that the Marines that should be defending and protecting United States citizens have been hijacked and are used in this way in the name of keeping people safe and saving lives. And that is not what they're doing. That is not what they're doing, even though that's what they claim because of the delusional narcissism and the grandiosity and wanting to be a hero and a savior. They've told themselves that that's what they are and that, they're not going to hurt civilians by doing these things, which is complete opposite of what they're doing. As they're abusing you, they will tell you to your face, we're not abusing you. And as they punch you and hit you and destroy you and bring you down, they're just like, we're not doing that. The whole time they're hitting you, they're saying, we're not hitting you. That's what they do. So any action taken to influence behavioral outcomes and examples of that force, like doctrine and the word force in Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, is about presence, deterrence, non-lethal tools, cyber effects, electronic warfare, lethal weapon systems. And the GIFCO job is to fill the middle of that spectrum and to operate in a intermediate force capability, which means below that level of armed conflict engaging citizens. That's the bottom line. That's what they're talking about. That's what Colonel Wendell Limbach is talking about, who is really the head and the director, who discusses how intermediate force capabilities support the national defense strategy across the competition continuum. And they use all these silly words, to justify their existence, the competition continuum. How do we compete in a market that we've never been in before amongst civilians in regular clothes? And how do we influence and guide and direct society the way we want it to go? And how do we do it undetected? That is a military operation in the United States run by the threat fusion centers, which have become the new embassies, in the FEMA regions throughout the United States under this emergency rule. So intermediate refers just to the part of the force spectrum that sits between no force, verbal commands, and having a presence to lethal force, guns, missiles, and kinetic weapons. So really, Intermediate literally means the middle layer of force. Not lethal, but not harmless, but controlled and scalable in an instant, and non-lethal. Why do you think they can coordinate and organize 20 against one and they're all synchronized and mimicking and mirroring you and copying every move you make? They're using these weapon systems to create hostility around people that they have selected to target. So it's not harmless. Like I said, the military's there to destroy and damage and take over areas. I mean, that is what they're all about. That's what they train to do. That's what they're all about. And to say that they're there to, do anything else but be used for their proper use is just a far-reaching delusion. You know what I mean? They are operating domestically as that middle layer force, not lethal, but not harmless. There is harm that is being created by their behavior modification and torture, and it is terrible. And people are dying because of the radiation and because of the microwave energy weapons that are literally burning people's organs alive in their house with EMF radiation. You have weaponized the electromagnetic spectrum, and then now you want to play God with it. It didn't take you long. Colonel Wendell Limbach is the main promoter of, implementing these scalable and not harmless, but not lethal. So they get to decide whether you're expendable or not, and, torturing you for 25 years with directed energy weapons and, gives you cancer in the end, and, they shorten your life. And it all can be denied. It all can be just denied that they are engaging innocent citizens. Okay. And that's kind of what I think after watching this video. But let's take a look at this video really quick, guys. Let me just turn this up and we'll go through. This is Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office interview with the director. So now that I've said all that, I just want to play this video and make some comments on it. This is Quantico, Virginia, United States. And this is DVID's Defense Visual Information Distribution Service website. And you can just get this information by just typing in this title, and you can go take a look at it and make sure you put in and fill in this as well in your Google search. And you will come to this page and you can watch this video yourself. And I just urge you to watch it again and again. Just watch it. Learn the terms intermediate force capability tactics and what those are, and learn what it means to compete in a low level, low intensity conflict, under the level of armed conflict, but still engaging the population. You pick up what this guy is saying, and basically what he's saying is he's justifying a war and prosecuting a war, for all these noble reasons, right? But using this selective enforcement, this profile policing and selective enforcement to damage and hurt and harm innocent people. And we've seen kids, we've seen children over and over get caught on a watch list and not be able to fly. How's that 3-year-old terrorist? You know what I'm saying? They make mistakes all the time. They make mistakes all the time, but yet their arrogance can't allow them to admit when they're wrong and just correct it. No, it's because there's malice behind what is going on in the US. There is malice, there is hatred, there is bitterness, there is hostage taking, basically, of the citizens of the United States through constant interruptions and through this intermediate force and the tactics that are being used to collapse and control and manage you. And they don't care if you can't take care of yourself. It's just about like making it so that they can manage you and call the shots for you. That's why they don't want you driving around and run their cars into you, and they are organized, they are coordinated, they are experts, and they are professionals. And I don't know if it's the EMF broadcast that just controls these people and allows them to coordinate on a whole other level than we've ever seen in life. They can push a button and create an army of robot drones that are hive-minded and synced up and linked up with the same thought life. You know what I mean? Acting the same and doing the same and moving the same. And you wouldn't believe it unless you saw it in front of you. And believe me, I believe it'll be demonstrated to you eventually, because the more this goes on, the more people are waking up, the more people are seeing that the world leaders have decided to prosecute a war. They don't call it a war, but they are prosecuting this war in the United States and worldwide. Community-based policing, profile policing, communist style policing, whatever you want to call it. But it's policing in which you are profiled and they use less than lethal weapons on you to manage the threats. And you have no say in it. You have no say in it. So, Colonel Wendell, this is Colonel Wendell. Let's listen to what he's saying. He is the director of this office that does all these great and wonderful things, using technology to save the day and be a hero. So let's listen to what he has to say. He's coming out in a second.
Intermediate force capabilities are best described as a concept that includes several things between presence and lethal effects. Traditionally, the force thinks of non-lethal weapons as being primarily only within the domain of the force protection or military police communities. By using the terminology intermediate force capabilities that include non-lethal weapons as well as other things, we're able to expand the conversation to a different group of service members and warfighters, including infantry, armor, surface combatants, and others.
And a citizen army in which they've co-opted and trained and coordinated with a civilian national security force that are really nominated themselves as the hive mind army in this warfare. And they are used like an army, they're used as a weapon system. These people have been merged with technology and are completely not there.
As they look at completing their missions across the competition continuum, to see how these capabilities that include non-lethal weapons are very helpful in helping them accomplish their missions without the unnecessary casualties, undesired civilian casualties, and the undesired destruction to that critical infrastructure.
Think about the moral high ground that he just took. We're going to use these weapon systems, these, novel weapon systems, EMF broadcast systems, wireless communication systems that are, directly to the brain, to the body. And we are going to microwave people. If they don't comply, we're going to do pain compliance. So you see, he goes right into really being disingenuous when it comes to the ability that they have in how the parameters by which they operate are broken all the time and they turn the power up.
So as we look at the competition paradigm we find ourselves today, we are.
Oh, you mean like the competition I talk about every day? That I use that word every day, and I'm always like, why are people competing with me? I don't even know these people. All these strangers are so vicious and hostile and want what I am going after. And it just so happens that they always want what I'm doing and want what I have and want where I'm going and want to take my choices and make those choices as if they're, merged with you like that. You get all these people doing the same thing as you, thinking the same thing as you, talking the same as you. You know what I mean? And that's designed to torture you and psychologically abuse you, obviously. Obviously. And they can do this syncing and heterodyning, basically, where they can sync brain waves with, a multitude of people so that all those people are functioning and operating as one, you see, and this allows them to weaponize people and use them like a battering ram. And especially, they love to hijack your loved ones and the people that you love the most and, really close family members. and they just love to, weaponize that family member, and they get off on and are very sadistic and enjoy hurting innocents. That's the types of people that I've seen that are my perps. And I'm just being honest, I'm just breaking it down. And Colonel Wendell Limbach is, discussing a stay behind army. Most Americans don't know we're in a crisis, we're in an emergency, and it's not just the debt, but it's many other fake crises and emergency that are done. Crisis management, you look up the term, you realize what it is. It's intentional, deliberate crisis to control society and drive you into the arms of the savior. And that savior just so happens to be the United States government and the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office. Intermediate force capability. So all these tactics are used below the level of armed conflict, but yet he admits to engaging civilians and citizens in this competition game that is functioning in a form of warfare, competing over your resources, competing over your home, competing over your car, competing over your job, competing over your connections, competing over whether or not you have enough this month to make it. It is not natural. It is a war. It is people being determined to stop you, block you, get in your way, sabotage you, undermine you, and then be able to deny it so they can keep doing it. That is what they are doing in the United States. This is just one example, guys. And I hope that people go and actually take a look at this website and listen to this video again. But I'm just going to keep playing it for a minute, and I'll try not to stop it, guys. But you know me, I just, and I appreciate everybody being here. Thanks for all my new subscribers and just everybody commenting. And, we got this thing down, and we are moving forward together, and we are, helping each other, and so I just want to say I appreciate everyone greatly. And from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate if these videos have helped you, if these videos have led you to the right information where you can get some footing and grounding and be able to have some relief and rest. That is what my goal is, because this life is short, and I don't need things. I'm not a materialistic person. I just am here living my life, sharing my experience, and sharing what God has shown me about what's going on and why my experience for the last 25 years has been so destructive and against my will and against my good choices that culminated in the results being good. And then those results are sacrificed by these people in a war because they don't want you to have influence. They don't want you to be able to influence others. They want domination. They want control. And this is the guy that leads it up. I mean, basically, he is one of the many that are a part of this problem that we're seeing with profile predictive policing and using energy weapons against the general public.
Facing adversaries that are competing in ways that are below the level of armed conflict. Intermediate force capabilities are uniquely capable of helping the warfighter compete across that entire continuum, and especially in that area below the level of armed conflict.
Oh, you mean like when grandma goes to the grocery store? She needs to be followed and watched and surveilled and, engaged in a provoking, mocking, ugly, toxic, angry way. So she reacts bad, and then you can label her as a terrorist? Are you going to label Granny as the terrorist now? I mean, is that what you're doing? See, what you guys got to understand is this selective enforcement and the dragnet. What they always do historically is they criminalize normal, lawful behavior and make everything illegal so that they can have an excuse to engage you all the time. Do you understand? So that's history.
Where traditionally the United States military does not invest in a lot of capabilities. I like to think of it as an example that we are preparing our force to be the best NFL football team in the world, ready to win the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, our adversaries know that that's the way we think, the way we train, and the
So, who are the adversaries? The 3-year-old that gets put on the terrorist watch list? Who are the adversaries that he's referring to? Because that is part of the main conversation I'm trying to have here is to talk about these things and realize, like, when these people have these tools and they have these programs and they have demonstrated the use of these programs and tools and it hasn't gone well. And it has been American citizens that are innocent complaining about being microwaved and burnt and tortured and followed and, having property damage over and over and over. They do the same tactics no matter what part of the country that I've been in. You know what I mean? They do the same tactics. You move in, all of a sudden all your neighbors move out and new ones move in right away and they all look like military dudes coming and going with you all the time no matter what time of the day you come and go, and they follow you to your car, then they follow you when you leave the property and tail you and follow you and drive their car at you and try to involve you in a accident. I mean, you wouldn't believe the stuff that many of us targeted individuals have even gone through. That's why I don't really, go on and on about, the attempts where, cars pull up alongside of you on the freeway and, on a highway and there's a divider in the middle and, you're just driving along and you see somebody in your rear view mirror just pull up all crazy and wild, and driving and swerving in between cars. It just so happened to be a red car, go figure. But you know what I'm saying? And then it pulls up next to you and the dude's flicking you off and swerving at you all fast and stuff and driving real close to try to touch, side windows, rear view mirror, and touch it to your car, to his, but I mean, all I did is slam on the brakes a long time ago. This was a long time ago, but they would always tail me and follow me and then create a hostile, dangerous environment and situation that was manufactured to try to involve me in an accident because it was again and again and again and again defying the laws of probability and involving me again, cutting brake lines, doing things like putting sugar in my gas tank, like keying my car, putting notes in my car, slashing my tires, putting nails in my tires again and again and again and again and again. These are the tactics that are used below the level of armed conflict. Okay? These are tactics that the military uses when they have a need for a stay behind army to police the chaos and the breakdown that they also caused.
the way we are investing in highly end lethal capabilities almost exclusively, while they are competing in a different game below that level of high intensity combat. They're actually playing soccer.
All that really means when he keeps saying that below the level of armed conflict, that's just his rationalizing of prosecuting a war against innocent Americans. And by labeling and profiling, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't resist it. You can't speak against it. You can't oppose it. You can't confront your accusers. And this is part of the problem of a dictatorship by emergency rule, where all due process is suspended because we have an emergency, and that's what they're doing. They are declaring an emergency every year annually in order to operate as a dictatorship in this restructured United States where there's the Patriot Act in place of the Constitution. And I'm not really even for, the founders and all that history, because I don't believe real history of what they tell us about the United States really over anything that we've been shown, like in public school and stuff like that. So I'm the type that can suspend, my belief in order to investigate and look deeper and be able to understand, that really all of history and everything we think we know is a lie. And, I'm like the first one to admit it. Like, you know what I mean? I don't really care what people think. I just know that unless there's real humility, you stop growing. And I don't claim to have arrived or become an expert. I'm just sharing what I've gone through and what is impressed upon me from day to day so that I can be helpful to others that take the time to listen to my videos. And, I don't have all the bells and whistles like editing all this stuff and doing all this stuff. because I really don't have time. But the main point is that the information is gold, and I hope it blesses you, and I hope it touches you, and I hope it raises you up, and I hope it gives you peace and freedom, and I hope it, gives you the knowledge base to operate in these uncertain times. You know what I mean? But really, we have this guy, this colonel, the head of the director, excuse me, of the Office of Force Capabilities, Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities. And let's go on and listen to his rationalization for, engaging people that are not armed. Do you see what I'm saying?
And they are being very effective competing in a game of soccer below the level of armed conflict. No.
Yeah, people's lives are not a game, bro. You know what I mean? It's not a game, it's not a sport, but that's the way you treat the torture and the abuse and of our lives. Like it's just a game, we're just a number and we're just a meat suit. You know what I mean? There's no regard for our humanity or for our livelihood or for our life force. You just are going to suck that all away with your vampire type behavior and rationalization of the most ugly abuse I've ever seen done to innocents.
Knowing that we have a football team that's not really prepared for that game. Traditionally, people think of warfighting missions in the United States military as being primarily at the high end, to be prepared for the highest end of conflict at all times. And we spend precious little time looking at how we engage around the world below that level of armed conflict. Interestingly, though, we actually spend the vast majority of our time engaging around the world without actually killing and destroying people. We are conducting humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, training.
Here goes the salesman. The colonel right here is deviating, and this is all part of selling it to the general public and saying basically, look the other way. It's like we know that the military engages in good activity once in a while and humanitarian activity, but to introduce that and talk about that as is just a diversion from the fact that this type of warfare and these weapon systems are being used against innocent citizens, all in the name of keeping people safe. And that is what allows these dudes to drive their claws in deeper and just all in the name of safety and security. They are going to use abuse to manage behavior, to manage the would be, could be, should be threats. Okay. And if they don't have a real enemy and a real threat, they will torture you to make you a threat. And, for many of us that are targeted individuals, that didn't work with us. We just kept going forward and kept trusting God and kept moving forward and kept believing and kept hoping and, watching, God, who's above all of this, really, cripple and checkmate and undermine their ability to just so easily dominate us and harm us and hurt us. So they have declared many people through profile policing that they are a threat. And you are labeled, you are profiled, and then you get dudes surrounding you running a style of warfare and tactics that are only used in war. I stand alone or stay behind armies. Okay, this is just them creating the police force, whether it's citizens, whether it's the military working with citizens. It's all about the third party groups that the government uses to abuse you. And then when they're caught, they can deny it and say, we didn't know anything about that. And that's part of the reason why we live in a national security state. When you hear national security, you just hear that nobody takes responsibility. That's what that means. And that anything that you investigate, like torture and being tortured and how it's being done, like, just if you investigate that, then, you go on a watch list because the keyword echelon, software, when you're searching basically, all this information, as we've found out, and I've said for years, is just being flagged and directed to headquarters, you know what I'm saying, like the police and stuff, because they are battling over our data and selling our private personal data, whether it's in your car. It doesn't really matter if you got a new car, because you're going to be track, trace, data based all the time. And in this dystopian police state where they collapse everything deliberately and then use that as the excuse that things are getting more radical. Meanwhile, you've got the military and the Marines operating domestically in regular clothes, looking like civilians that are just average, everyday civilians. And they are operating on a level of less than armed conflict, but still engaging. It's boots on the ground and a hiding of their continual presence and a denial that they're operating domestically. And it's always below the level of armed conflict that you see community-based policing tactics of abuse and control being done. There is like, if there are 10 out of 10 things that describe what community-based policing is all about, all 10 of those things are being hit by, uh, the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office Director, Colonel Wendell Limbach. Okay.
Missions, things like that. And we have precious few capabilities that help us successfully accomplish those missions when we do find that we run into adversaries or challenging situations that don't necessarily call for lethality, but do need to have some way to push back against somebody that is trying to interfere with our operations. That is where intermediate force capabilities can be particularly helpful. When you run into those civilian populations or their critical infrastructure, such as hospitals, churches, holy sites, and you run into a situation where an adversary are using those people or that critical infrastructure.
You're hearing the sales pitch right now, guys, of how they, justify hiding this technology in plain sight and using it on the general public, guys. And he's just right now, he's just rationalizing and justifying and giving you reasons why it's okay to engage innocent civilians in the name of keeping people safe and for the greater good, for the potential. It's not even policing you for what you've done in reality or even breaking the law. It's the threat assessments are done continually by the threat fusion centers, and you are flagged and labeled and destroyed and neutralized. That means you're going to have dudes competing with you, making war against your standing, your autonomy, your independence, your resources. This is what they do when they prosecute a war against innocent American citizens.
As leverage against you, and all you have are lethal means, you're at a sincere disadvantage. Intermediate force capabilities enable us to conduct missions and accomplish missions in those environments without the unnecessary casualties, undesired civilian casualties, and the undesired destruction to that critical infrastructure.
Oh, yeah. You mean like in the United States when someone that you've deemed a terrorist by profile policing with no proof, evidence, or facts, so that you can have the excuse to suspend that person's rights under the terror laws and then just torture them to death? When they go to the store, when they go get gas, when they go wash their car, when they want to go on a walk. You know what I'm saying? Because what's done in the background is the hype, it's all about the threats, the threats, the threats, and this is their training. Really, what's happened is the military has been radicalized against citizens over time. The military has been hardened against its own citizens, and most people are just behind and don't understand that the stay behind army is present. The stand-in forces are present. That is what a lot of our perps are. They are part of participating in groups that this guy promotes and loves and is pushing for, and all in the name of keeping you safe and saving lives. But what about the abuse? Why doesn't he want to talk about all the different damage and all the different testimonies of people coming forward being burnt in their own house? Why doesn't he want to talk about the radiation levels and the cancer rates being so high because we're bathed in this radiation soup as they slow kill all of us? So you might be a target, you might not be. You might not be selected and singled out like I am. But at the same time, you are also being murdered and killed slowly and unnaturally because of the level of these wireless broadcast systems that blanket whole areas with this EMF, very low frequency waves that are damaging to the human body and the brain and the tissue. And over time of being controlled and hit with these types of energy weapons, it can give you cancer and it can radiate you to death. But because, the small print on your cell phone contract, says that you're not even supposed to pick up the phone or hold it in your hands because of its cancer causing ability. I mean, that if you read the small print on your cell phone contract, you can see where it says, don't even pick the phone up or carry it or hold it. It even says in the cell phone contracts across the board. And that is because of the EMF radiation coming off that phone and the signals coming and going to that receiver and transmitter of data, wireless, carrier waves that are carrying data, and then they get unpacked, and that data becomes, available to be decoded, and so now they are directing these energy weapons directly at the body and the brain and controlling people, your loved ones, your family members, your boss. Wherever you are as a targeted individual, this war is being prosecuted against you. And when you turn to your family, they hijack your family and then use them as a weapon against you to bring more destruction. So there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide because this less than lethal, below the level of armed conflict type thing is going on. And that just means engaging you in a way that, can be denied. So when you hear below the level of armed conflict, that means, having an army of dudes in regular clothes that are ready to go to war and ready to throw down and are available to be instantly scaled up if needed. Okay, and that's why you can walk out your house and the neighbors come out at the same time as you, and then you walk to the mailbox and the same old neighbor, is going out with you at the same time, getting the mail, walking back to the house at the same time. You go to your car, they go to the car. You go to your mailbox, they go to the mailbox. You go wash your car, they go wash the car. You go on the other side of the neighborhood, they go on the other side of the neighborhood and cross your path. And it's all about getting closer and closer to you to have that conflict. And they push and they push and they push with many forms of abuse to get that conflict going. And we just don't give it to them.
If you are doing the wrong thing, or you're being perceived as being overbearing or using too much lethal force, you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear about it in the local media. You're going to see it in the population becoming alienated with you and what you're trying to accomplish.
That's perfect. I mean, now you're actually speaking the truth and you're actually sharing something that is relevant and real. You know what I mean? Like that these weapon systems have already been used on the general public. We have video after video of people coming forward and, trying to present their case and testimony of the microwave pulse energy and the damaging effects that these weapon systems have on the nervous system and the body and the brain and the organs. And, these people are being tortured in their own homes. And, this guy will just say it's just a conspiracy. We just, it's deny, 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 abuse, 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 deny, 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 and push for the control, push for the breakdown of everything, because that's part of the passive aggressive nature of being able to be present and abuse, but hide the abuse so you can keep abusing and keep remaining hidden. And that is why they engineer the tactics to be modeled after someone who has the symptoms of schizophrenia. The very tactics of abuse that they do to you are designed to get you to hurt yourself and make yourself look crazy because, you're out there saying, red and white cars keep following me around. And then people just think you're paranoid and schizophrenic. But that's not the case at all. But that's what they push for. That's why they have thought very deeply about the tactics that allow them to exist and have a presence and an influence over the general public and operate domestically.
I think we will see the effectiveness of intermediate force capabilities writ large by the absence of that hostility and the absence of the people that we're trying to help being frustrated with us.
Okay, people he's trying to help be frustrated with us. So he's talking about enemies and he's talking about helping enemies. You think he really wants to do that? And who are these enemies? Who are these enemies and what qualifies you as an enemy? Does anybody ask those questions? Like, what qualifies you as someone that is considered to interfere with operations when your operations are secret and nobody even knows what's going on, and most people don't even understand what's going on and cannot even comprehend the level of control and abuse that's going on? So, what is it? What is it?
So I believe the real future for non-lethal weapons technology with regard to intermediate force capabilities.
Just one last interruption, really. I mean, I'm going to say that, notice how he prefaces everything. It's to keep you safe, it's to save lives, it's to not cause civilian casualties, it's all these list of things that he wants to sell. But the fact is that these weapon systems can straight up kill you.
Truly is directed energy. And specific types of directed energy are actually very mature today and could be fielded within a very short period of time if the military decided that that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah, again, he's lying right there because he's trying to convince you that it's something in the future far off when it's deployed and being used. And all the military contractor companies prove that because they're making all the weapons platforms and there's investment and there's professors at all the Ivy League school universities coming forth in doing military training where they train a group of soldiers on how to use these weapons and come and join the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, to test those weapon systems and to engage in, how are we going to use these systems? And so this is where it's happening, guys. Quantico, Virginia, and in this little building, I believe, behind him, that's where all this is going down. And he tries to minimize, he tries to justify and rationalize, but he's not being open about the negative aspects and is unwilling to talk about those because it's probably a matter of national security. If you expose these people operating on the United States soil and committing a war of attrition against innocent Americans and families, nobody's going to really believe that. But you got to understand and put the pieces together and realize that the national security state is in place. We are in a crisis. We are in an emergency. That's legally how we're considered. We have been hijacked and restructured, guys. The United States ceased to exist a long time ago, and we are just in a dictatorship that is, you pick your flavor. It doesn't matter, like I said, communism, socialism, fascism, whatever you want to call it, but it's a top-down control grid, like a pyramidical structure of control. And so it's the same model as we've always seen. You know what I'm saying? So they, pick what the flavor is and then hand it to you. When, again, we are rejecting all of it. We are rejecting all of it. We are in a state of national emergency and crisis. And I'm trying to tell you guys, it doesn't matter what the crisis is. There could be hundreds of crises, but it's rule by crisis. That is what is going on. Executive order, dictatorship, rule in the crisis under emergency rule. And that is what allows the military and FEMA and Homeland Security and the FBI and all these agencies to operate domestically on innocent citizens. And I say innocent because of the nature of this system and how they impose it on innocent people and just label you and torture you for years and sabotage every uh, part of your life, every area of your life and development. Okay. And this guy knows better, and he could tell us a number of good things, exposing the level of advancement, but he wants you to believe it's off in the future when we're all being tortured by this right now. So is it far off in the future that these weapon systems will be, legitimized by you and admitted to? You know what I mean? Or is it happening right now and has been happening for years and years and years and years, where American citizens are being tortured and eliminated, and it's all made to look like an accident? It's all made to look like, oops, the guy just got cancer. Oh well.
do. Specifically, are technologies that are millimeter wave technologies that are extremely effective against personnel type targets. They provide a silent, invisible energy that makes a target individual feel as though they have been heated up.
Oh, he even used our favorite term, guys. I mean, I'm so grateful. You know what I mean? This guy is breaking it down and saying, the targeted individuals, you mean like all of us that are complaining about being microwaved and being tortured in our own homes and being followed around and having property damage and being blacklisted from social life as a whole, being isolated for years, being cut off from anything that would aid, help, support, and allow a targeted individual to take care of themselves. You don't want that. What you want is a collapse control game in which you escalate the senses of desperation so you can turn around and role reverse. And when you get the reactions that you want after torturing innocent people, then you just label them a terrorist, or you label them an extremist or a religious extremist or delusional or crazy or mentally ill or lost or in need of mental help, as the story always has gone in history. I mean, just think about the orphan trains, and think about the insane asylums that were all over the place, and it was for a reason. Okay, and this was in the United States and worldwide. But so we have this guy not being honest with us, guys, about the fact that these weapon systems have been deployed. And you'll hear a lot of doublespeak. You'll hear a lot of yes, no. So we have to realize when we listen to this that two polar opposites don't equal the same thing. So yes is not the same as no. And when you got someone speaking out of both sides of their neck and saying yes and saying no as if they equal the same thing, when there's such contradiction, so that really you never know what's going on because both are true. You know what I mean? So, or one is true, one is not true. Which one is it? Because they both can't equal the same thing. But that is this brainwashing tactic that they are trained in using and doing. And I'm sure this guy, knows who a lot of us are. I mean, he's very involved in the Quantico, Virginia Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, running the force against innocent citizens and justifying the torture and abuse and damage to keep things safe and save lives.
But it is an incredibly safe and effective way to compel behavior. Another technology that is
So how do you compel behavior? I'd like to know. Torture, pain compliance, microwaving somebody's skin, microwaving the sensitive areas of the body. How about that? That really gets people to conform and fall in line. I mean, when you're radiating the family jewels and you get somebody peeing blood and you're torturing somebody's nipples and you're you're taking pins and needles and using electromagnetic waves to burn the skin and create blisters and make the face swell and damage the nervous system so that the person can never be creative or settle down enough and relax enough to really take hold of what real life is all about. But you got people just living in survival mode, and I'm trying to say there's no accident here, that the survival mode and the collapse of the United States and the world and the economy is all just part of this orchestrated, coordinated breakdown and transfer of power. Do you understand? So, but this guy is operating domestically on families and on innocent American citizens because they just decide who's a threat and who's not based on no real standard. Okay, but just getting their butt hurt, because somebody comes along and breaks it down and shows like what these dudes really are saying to you. Okay, so
Incredibly useful in the modern realm with regard to directed energy is microwave energy. And that is incredibly effective against material targets such as vessels, i.e., outboard motors on boats, and also civilian cars and vehicles.
oh, and also just the electrical signals and basically the auric field or the electrical signals of the brain and the body. We are electrochemical beings. You know what I'm saying? So if they can fry the electronics in your car and shut it off, and they've done that to me hundreds of times, guys, where they blast my car with energy weapons, and then the next thing you know, I'm dealing with like lights out all the time, and there's no cause, there's no reason. You take the car again and again in to have it looked at, nobody can find it, the issue. It's one of those things where they can fry the electronics in your car so that it doesn't start or so that it dies in the middle of driving it. And I can't tell you how many times that's been done to me and how many different cars I've had to go through because of the harassment and the torture and the abuse and the destruction that's always done to our property, as you guys well know. You know what I mean? So let's keep listening to this. Colonel Wendell Limbach. He's in the hot seat, and we're examining what he's been up to and what he's been doing and what he does at the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office and how important it is to understand this office. And it's important to understand terms like urban warfare, low intensity conflict, non lethal weapon systems. These are all terms that I think are very important to understand, along with below the level of armed conflict, he said, and being able to compete below the level of armed conflict using EMF weapons systems and then just selling humanitarian garbage that he has to bring up and mention to misdirect from the horror of the level of control that these weapons platforms bring over all of us.
That energy very safely can stop those motors at a distance, silently and invisibly, without having that unintended consequence that can come from firing a shot into an engine block or more dramatic ways of stopping vehicles through sudden barriers and things like that. The thing that I believe that really needs to be overcome to get them out the door and become real game changers is we have to get over what is known as the fear of the new. And this is a perfect example of how we have been unable to get directed energy systems such as ADS, active denial system, or active denial technology, millimeter wave technology, into the hands of the warfighter. From the tactical through the...
That again is false. FEMA and Homeland Security and your local threat fusion centers through the National Guard have been given the LRADs for crowd control. And so he's always kind of just speaking in a way that claims some form of ignorance. Okay, this is just a tactic of mind control that this guy's practicing by misdirecting the conversation to we're a hero, we're saviors, we're here to keep things safe, we're the hero in this situation, and we're here to just protect and serve basically, and then keep peace. But that peace is kept through torture. That peace is kept through harassment. That peace is kept by singling individuals out and removing every form of support that that person can show themselves, and then calling that person mentally ill because they don't fit into society, the very society that these groups of people have, marginalized and blacklisted us from, because we know about these things and they don't like it. They don't like our consciousness. They don't like the fact that God shows us everything. And we don't have to go to school. We don't have to, like, God has given us a gift of discernment, and live by your intuition and never doubt your intuition, because for the most part, for the last 25 years, I've had to live exclusively depending on my intuition, and always find out afterwards, as you're tested and as your intuition says, so it becomes later. And you look back and you go, wow, I was right about that. I should learn to listen to this sense and burden and feeling inside that I get, because it comes with spiritual knowledge and it is unpacked, and we break this down. And I just love you guys. I just want you to know that I'm in this fight with you of exposing and revealing and, leading people to the proper understanding and information that's out there. And I'm not claiming that I know everything, but it's good to watch these, colonels and commanders talk about the urban warfare that's being committed against us and worldwide. I mean, the less than lethal, non-lethal weapons force that is amongst us all, and is coordinating and organizing and harassing and destroying and sabotaging and undermining. And this is how they operate and compete in the environment that he's talking about. And it's really how they operate without being detected. Okay. All plausible deniability tactics used to abuse innocence. That is what we're addressing today.
Operational to the strategic level, intermediate force capabilities help to determine intent at range and to provide time and space.
You see that little laser weapon in the video to the left of him? It's so funny because, I mean, that's literally what they do. They just blast your car and you just have to pull over and then get a tow truck. And then once you get it fixed, they'll do it again. And then once you get it fixed, they'll do it again. And it's this persistence and this competition over the resources all the time. And these people trying to sacrifice and destroy and ruin and cut your brake lines and key your car and throw bricks at your car. They like to damage and devalue and destroy the proper use of things. They don't want you being able to meet your need. And we've got these people competing with us over us meeting our own basic common needs to create the desperation. And then that desperation turns into exactly what they have been pushing for all along, as they hide the abuse in a double standard of abuse and play both sides of the fence. And that is what they're doing. So they are radicalizing society by torture and through MK Ultra worldwide, through using directed energy weapons on the general public. And this is the way they think. And I just wanted to show you how Colonel Wendell Limbach thinks, guys. So, I mean, I hope you enjoy the video. I hope you get something out of this. This is Colonel Wendell Limbach. Okay. And this guy is breaking down as the director of the office. I think he might know some things that would be important to be able to figure out here. So,
for decision making. And the latest generation of directed energy, long range, intermediate force capability, non lethal weapons technology would enable people to affect individuals and targets.
hey, they've done that to me hundreds of times. You see that laser come out and hit that guy, and you don't see a laser. You don't see these silent weapon systems that can be denied that they're even being used. You just get cancer and die one day. You never had cancer before, but all of a sudden it's fourth stage. How did that happen? You know what I mean? Is it the food, the water, the air, all the things that they're using to poison us and to make an anti-human environment? I mean, when you go to the grocery store today, I look around and I'm like, nothing in here is food. Not one thing in here is real food. I mean, literally, you look around and you're just like, dude, I'm gonna go to a farmer's market in local because I stopped shopping at grocery stores because you go in there and it's just all plastic, all BPA, bisphenol A, chemicals and plastics in the water like that are toxic for you and that disrupt your hormones, and all these chemicals are illegal in other countries to even use, but they put it in everything like red dye and aspartame and all these chemicals that are literally murdering American citizens, and don't talk about that. That's a conspiracy. You're just, a danger and a threat, and we need to silence and neutralize you. So, truth tellers and whistleblowers and people that know the truth understand what I'm saying about this apparatus being in place in our society and being hidden. And then it comes to the surface and flexes against you to let you know that their presence is there. Okay. And that is what many of us who are gaslit all day long are supposed to be reminded of and intimidated by.
Beyond small weapons range and enable them to determine whether an unknown individual is actually a threat. It is safe, it is effective, it is silent and invisible.
It's so safe that, they can turn up the power, electrocute your organs, or burn or microwave your organs inside your body like they did to me, and put me in a hospital for like 6 months of throwing up blood and bleeding internally so bad that I couldn't even, lay down for 6 months when I went to sleep. Obviously, I had to sleep in a recliner upright because the blood kept running down into my lungs. And of course, everybody knows that has had lung damage or lung problems that when that happens, it makes you throw up blood. And I just kept crawling from my bed to the toilet for 6 months straight. And everybody at that time didn't want to have anything to do with me and abandoned me and ghosted and vanished and helped to forward my pain and misery and calamity and tried to pull the rug out from under me by extorting the vulnerabilities at a time where I needed love, support, and care by family and friends. There they were participating in the abuse and hiding it and hiding it. And so we just have to understand that this is a multi-layered system of abuse and control. And many of us, I'm not black and white about it. I don't sit there and say, well, they're not using these weapons and they're using these weapons. And I'm not dogmatic about this. I just think it's layers of different platforms and different, waves of technology that have come out that are being given to the sheriff's office, given to the threat fusion centers to operate domestically in the United States and to modify behavior through pain compliance and torture. They know pain works, to get compliance at least. So they are allowed to torture you because they label you a threat and then just say that justifies the torture. Now we need to manage the threat, all profile policing. You haven't broken a law, you haven't done anything wrong, and you're being followed around every day, and the quality of your life is being taken away and being lowered and damaged and devalued. And we don't want that. We don't want that. You can have your mess that you create back on your head. We're not going to carry the mess, and we're not going to clean it up either. Only you are going to clean it up, the ones that committed these crimes against innocent Americans. Literally. And, the justice will come because the truth can't be buried. And, the lip of truth shall be established forever. But a lying tongue is but for a moment. It's just a moment. And the truth will stand, and everything else will come to the surface and be exposed. And that central fact is that our own military, the Marines, are being trained and used domestically in a hidden way, and below the level of armed conflict, using directed energy weapons on the general public. That is what he's saying. And so don't get confused when he says, the threats that we have to deal with and think that it's some brown guy in a cave over in the Middle East when they have taken this whole apparatus that they built and sold to us as if, they're dudes in a cave over in the Middle East that somehow got through all of our defenses and, made all these buildings come down, and we're supposed to believe the narrative and the story and, just all the stuff that goes along with that whole situation that we know was really used as an excuse to direct this system at Americans through, just making everything illegal, and then pretending like, people are breaking laws because they speak the truth or expose the secrets and expose those things that are in the dark. And then that qualifies you, and the standards that they use to qualify you as a danger and a threat are literally uh, arbitrary. It's just literally anything and everything they feel or say at their own discretion. So the abusers that set up this whole system are basically hiding the abuse that they're doing and then posing as the savior to that very abuse that they're doing as they socially engineer society and deal with influence other than their influence in society. And it doesn't have to be a bad influence. You're not a bad influence. You bring the light, you bring the goodness, you bring the love, you know what I mean, in your heart. You're genuine, you're authentic, you're real, you're speaking your life, your truth. And so this is the way we are. And they hate it, they despise it, and they truly hate independence and freedom because they've all already merged with this Borg hive mind system where everybody's sharing the same thoughts, I guess, where everybody's sharing in the same ideas, where literally people are under a broadcast system that is hijacked, their own personality and their own identity. And I guess that's what people are willing to give up is their own identity for empty promises and for all this high sounding language that just is a way to conceal and cover up and misdirect from what is really going on here. You know what I mean? He keeps saying in this video and others, we just don't want to cause casualties and we would rather keep things safe and not hurt people. And that sounds all great and all fine until you meet one after the next who has had to go to the hospital because of these types of weapon systems and the damage that they can create, like when they fried my upper respiratory tract and electrocuted my organ in my own house. And there was no cause, no reason, and they just turned up the power, like I said, and they just decided to try to eliminate me and make it look like I had a lung problem or something. But suddenly, my lung was fried and burnt, my upper respiratory tract burnt by the microwave pulse energy, and I was almost dead. I mean, they tried to kill me, and all my family and friends sheepishly turned their back on me, and they knew what was going on. They just didn't want to admit, and they didn't want to confess. And, that's why they ghost and vanish, because looking at your face reminds them of what demons they have in them. You know what I mean? That's literally the case.
I believe that the intermediate force capabilities concept has been extremely effective in broadening the conversation beyond lethality to the entire force. That conversation that lethality, while always necessary and always must be present and available, is not the solution to all problems.
Oh, isn't that so nice, guys? We have him basically assuring us as a trained killer and a military guy that is a colonel and brags in other videos, that that's why he became a Marine because he wants to drive tanks over houses and, would rather be armed and use lethality. And he even talks about how the Marines that he knows feel, that that is what they join the Marines for. And it's uh, usually the case where most Marines that are introduced to these operations that are domestic using energy weapons, usually they don't want to get involved because there isn't the ability to use lethal force. That's the way they think. That's the way soldiers think in the Marines. And this guy is selling you a bunch of garbage. These weapons are deployed, they're being used, and they have been used for a long, long, long time on the general public.
At the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, we have dedicated professionals and scientists whose sole mission it is to evaluate different technologies from legacy systems all the way to the cutting edge directed energy systems to ensure that they are safe and effective for use in their intended paradigms.
That is so funny that he even says the word safe. When we know, guys, as victims of this technology, we know like it's not safe and it can kill you and it can cause lifelong damage to your body, your brain, your nervous system. It can alter your body and brain and nervous system for life. It leaves you with a scar. It leaves you with damage that otherwise wouldn't have happened if these people weren't playing this stupid game and trying to start conflict in the name of keeping people safe. You understand? So, yes, they're in the background. Yes, they're operating domestically. Yes, they're radicalizing society through torture and through hiding that abuse and hiding that torture to try to get conflict going. And it's not just them, guys. This is a spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical layered battle with layered technologies. So I try not to be so dogmatic, but we've shown videos where they can burn your skin, and how many of us have complained? And he brags about the distance that these weapon systems can achieve. So you could have somebody 100 yards away from you blasting you with energy weapons and giving you cancer day in, day out, day in, day out, shutting down your body, shutting down your organs through torture.
We have scientists that know the amount of energy that can be exposed to a human being, be it through millimeter wave or microwave energy, that will get the desired effects, but that will be extremely safe and well below any level that will result in a lasting adverse effect for that.
That's see another fabrication and confabulation in the story. We know that it's not safe, that they are burning people in their own homes that are innocent. And that is the kind of battle we're in, where the military has sworn allegiance to an agenda. And that agenda doesn't include you and me surviving, really. I mean, it's this slow kill box that they put these people in that are targeted just like me, hardcore targeted, where you're always engaged. They're always running an intercept on you. It's always you going about to try to do what you want to do for the day and being blocked and stopped and opposed and in a hostile way, and all acting and performing to get you to commit to what you see as if it's just a normal occurrence, that people are following you everywhere you go. So when you start talking about it, you will be labeled crazy and mentally ill, and there is really no recourse but God alone, really. I mean, when you come down to it, like, everybody's on board, okay? And family and friends are participating in this because they think they're gods. They think they're so special, and they're delusional and grandiose, and they think they're a hero and a savior, and they're part of the power structure. That's what they believed, and they're not, but that's what they believe. And they are willing to sacrifice us on the altar of their ego. And I'll say it hundreds of thousands of times. That is what they do. Getting a breakdown, getting a collapse, competing over resources is now a military agenda. And, Colonel Wendell is breaking that down for us. He is the chief director at the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office.
For anybody that has been involved in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past 2 decades, undoubtedly they've been in a unit or near a unit where that unit was forced into a very challenging situation. And with only lethal means available, oftentimes challenging situations that come out of unknown individuals approaching a perimeter, vehicles approaching a convoy that don't understand that they should be keeping a distance. Ultimately, a decision has to be made. What are we going to do to protect the force? And many times,
I can tell you what you're going to do. You're going to read people's brainwaves and their inner dialogue through EMF and through blanketing whole areas with neural remote monitoring technology, and you will just, be able to hear somebody's inner dialogue, excuse me, uh, and that inner voice, which can also be engineered and created, if you don't know, through the microwave auditory hearing effect. So they like to torment you and torture you with brainwaves and just keep torturing you on a loop. And you'll have a song stuck in your mind and you'll be like, this isn't natural. Like for the last week, it's just been every conscious second that song is repeating in my head again and again and again and again till you become weary, till you become tired, till you become overwhelmed, and you realize like this is not normal, like I'm under attack. You know what I mean? And there's always symptoms with these energy weapons being used, and we gotta break down and look at what those symptoms are. And we're going to keep pressing forward, guys. Let's just take a look at the end of this video really quick.
when there's only been lethality available, lethal means are used in those ambiguous situations. Tragically, oftentimes with disastrous results. And only after the fact do we realize we've harmed an innocent civilian or damaged infrastructure in a situation where that was not intended in any way.
Okay, so you use directed energy weapons, you keep the infrastructure and the buildings safe, but you're damaging and slow killing and radiating and harming innocent people that are bystanders in this war of attrition. And the war of attrition, they've singled citizens out, innocent civilians. It is a political policing worldwide, and they single out innocent civilians that are opposed to this type of dominance and a complete usurping of the will. Okay. It's evolutionary because these perps have merged with the technology and are being controlled fully by it and willingly. We might be influenced by these energy weapons and stuff through different periods of time, but we do not willingly submit ourselves to the hijacking of our identity. We just don't do that, and we never will.
That's why intermediate force capabilities as a concept and the need to have tools below lethality are essential to the entire force.
Yeah, tools below lethality, guys. You hear that? Tools, he needs tools that don't kill you, but can control you and be strong enough to control your behavior and to control your choices and your decision making. And this immorality of basically taking God's creation and hijacking it and then using innocent people in a system of control and mind control to literally damage every single one of us as targeted individuals. You used those things that we were attached to the most. And that was all by design to get the biggest reaction you could. So we'd be fools and step into the role that you have crafted for us. And we reject that. We know who we are. We know our identity. And we know that this is going on, guys. So I just wanted to say, I'm just bringing you this video today. I just wanted to comment on a couple things and break down and keep pushing in this direction. I think it's important to understand that there is low intensity conflict happening in the United States. Non-lethal weapons are being used, which are lethal. Okay, that's what you see with the 1984 George Orwell, war is peace. So, and the non-lethal weapon systems, which are lethal, they just keep saying they're not lethal, but the power can be adjusted and they can kill you. So, and sometimes they get a commando that just like, hey man, I joined the Marines to have the right to use lethality. That's why I joined the Marines. And that's what they say, when they're approached with less than lethal operations. You understand what I'm saying? So, guys, I love you. Again, keep checking out the videos. I'll keep coming with the videos, but this is really just an education for all of us. I don't claim to know everything. I don't claim to have the answers. I'm just going with what God puts on my heart, guys. And I just wanted to thank every one of you for the comments and for subscribing and just really, I'll be more clear the more the channel grows about the direction of the channel of continuing to keep exposing and pointing out the elephant in the room. And this is not the only branch of the government that, uh, is directly related to our torture, but it's just one of the many offices because it's a system that, is like an octopus. And once, the octopus, has all these tentacles and all these arms, right? So, uh, they have layered their control. They've layered it so that if you get through one element of their control, there's another one in place to counteract that. So they've thought about each adjustment and have used AI to game citizens in this war of collapse and control and passive aggressive hostility that all can be denied on other things, and they can hide in plain sight, right in plain sight, in regular clothes, influencing family, friends, and people to go along with it. They just approach your family and say, with a fake dossier and your picture, saying that you're an extremist and associated with extremist groups, which is a total lie. And they do that to so many people, or this guy's a pedophile, or this guy abuses children, or this guy beats up women all the time, and is just a bad guy. That's what they like to push in their narrative of you. And we covered the narrative agenda the other day, just touching upon that it is important to understand the rewriting of the narrative, the control, the manipulation that these perps have within them is a diabolical level of control and abuse that they are after, and they will stop at literally nothing to make sure that you are neutralized and subdued and controllable, and they will do whatever it takes in their abuse to you because it's all for the greater good and for the future of humanity. I mean, don't you understand? So do the abuse now for the greater good later is what family and friends have been promised. But what fools, to trust Satan, so to speak. I mean, literally the father of lies, and they think that they're going to somehow come out unscathed, and think that God doesn't see all these secret abuses and how cursed a person has to be in order to strike at their neighbor in secret and hide the shameful, ugly engagement of abuse and harassment, and then just pretend once you abuse the person enough, once that person breaks down and reaches their breaking point, then you turn around and pose as the expert victim of these dangerous, dangerous extremists that need to be put in labor camps, really. You know what I mean? How about we start putting innocent American citizens in labor camps and working them until their last day? You know what I mean? And not even pay them. Might as well. But I'm just saying this because we are in a system that is built to abuse and to collapse and to control everybody. And I'm just here speaking the truth and letting you guys know that this is my life, this is your life, many of you. And many of you can't even breathe. You can't even get outside without being watched and followed and harassed. You can't even go on a walk. You can't adjust yourself to get away from these people. And it is a continual presence of harassment interfering with what you do, what you say, where you go, what you believe, what you think. And really they get you alone so that they can start working on your inner life after they've isolated you and collapsed everything in your life and blame you for being the cause of it on top of it, and then justify their abuse and say, well, this guy couldn't pay for his place of living. He couldn't pay for a car. He's not stable. And, we need to move in and take control and, manage this unstable threat. And that is what they do. That's what they convince our families to go along with. And it's complete and total mayhem to have a standing army that can operate in a competitive way in a battle space that's new, using what they call fourth generational warfare and using directed energy weapons and platforms and signals and frequencies and light and audio to be able to really put the pain on you and to really show you that they are in full and total control over your loved ones, over the people around you. And we're still trying to figure out the reason why we're not. We're just, and why we have the responses that we do to the torture and the abuse. And when we are tortured, we just keep discovering that there's something deeper to our humanity and faculties and instruments that we have that we haven't even begun to start playing yet. You understand what I'm saying? There is a music within us. There's a music within us. And pretty soon that music is going to be heard, and all across the world, people will start to wake up and realize that there is a war being prosecuted against you as a citizen and a civilian. And you heard the colonel say that their main focus is to operate below the level of armed conflict. That is what they're trained to do. Operate below the level of armed conflict, creating the low intensity conflict, because there is no conflict that's real or genuine. It's just that their presence creates the hostility because they're abusing and damaging property and doing all these things that are abusive and hostile and damaging. And then they turn around when you catch them. And when you go to hold them accountable, you did it to yourself. You feel me? So that's the way this game is played, guys. I love you big time. Again, thanks for all the good comments, and I always love hearing from people that are targeted individuals that have gone through all of this mayhem and chaos. But for many of us, we're in the same boat. Our lives have been uprooted, and really everything that we depended on that's natural and material speaking, we have been in this fight for our survival in our lives, just to sustain ourselves and just to eat and like just to be able to go to the store, so they reduce us to a level of manageability and control, and the abuse is used. And it is not natural, it is street theater, it is scripted. And that is why the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office, that is why they are there operating as this domestic army and this domestic military force that can be scaled instantly so that they can deal with threats right when they happen in live time. Having a presence, having a stand in army or a stay behind force, a stay behind force. And remember, in Iran a long time ago, Mohammad Mossadegh, refused British petroleum and I think was going to nationalize the oil. And the CIA came in and started putting out leaflets in his name and doing crimes in the name of Mohammad Mossadegh to get the population hopping mad. And then they call for, doing all these different things in Project Northwoods. Look up Project Northwoods and take a look at what our own government called to do in order to run this kind and style of asymmetrical guerrilla type warfare that uses less than lethal weapons, low intensity conflict, like a fever in the background, driving the desperation. And they are there to create the desperation, is what I'm trying to say. Love you guys. Peace out.